Hello, welcome to Introduction to Java Programming. In this session, we discuss about constructors. What is constructor? What is a default constructor? What is a parameterized constructor? What is constructor overloading? So all these details we are going to learn in this session. Let's begin. So we have seen in our previous programs, whenever you want to create an object, a constructor is required. So here, when I say new student, so here the student, whatever I am writing, is actually creating an object of a student, right? So this is actually a constructor. Any class name with parentheses is a constructor. And this constructor has no arguments. So this is actually called a default constructor. My point here is you want to create an object, you require a constructor. So we should learn about constructors. Let's actually discuss. What is a constructor? A constructor is a special method used to initialize or construct the state of an object. So in order to construct the object, you require a special method that is nothing but the constructor. What it is going to do is it is initializing the object, or it is constructing the state of the object. So in the class, you have instance members. Those members are going to get associated with an object. Fine. And in order to initialize them, in order to construct them, a constructor is required. Okay, so we will see all the details actually through a program. Of course, we have understand this a little bit in previous sessions. Now, other points actually, it is invoked at the time of object creation. The constructor we will use at the time of object creation, and whenever we actually use with a new keyword. It constructs the values or data for the object, so that we have already understood. And what are some special features about that? So it is syntactically similar to a method. So it's a method only, but a few differences are there. And it has the same name as name of its class. The constructor should have always the same name as the parent class. Sorry, the class actually. Okay, so the parent class is not the correct word. So the class name should be same as uh, this constructor name actually. That means constructor name is exactly similar to the class name. Okay, fine. Yeah, so if I have a class student, my constructor should be with the name student. If I have a class test, my constructor will be with the name test. If I have a class first, my constructor will be the name first actually. And yeah, of course, I will tell you the other things here. And a constructor is written without a return type. A constructor is written without a return type actually. So let me tell you an example so that it will be understandable. So for example, my class is student. Okay, I have some class student here. Now I will write a constructor like this. A student. Okay, so this is the default constructor because I am not giving any parameters over here. And this constructor can be made public. Okay, so if the constructor can be used by any class, then we have to make it public. You want to restrict to a package, then we should not say public. Okay, and we want to restrict to the same class, then we have to say private. Okay, we want to restrict to the child classes, then we have to say protected. Okay, so those are the access modifiers which we have already discussed. Right, usually constructor we have to make public because somebody else has to create an object of this particular class. And if you observe here, there is no return type. There is no return type. So whenever you write a method, there should be a return type. But here there is no return type. So a constructor is written without a return type. But that doesn't mean it will not return any value. Okay, a constructor is special actually. So it is written without a return type, but returns class type. It returns something back. Once the object is created, object is constructed, it returns a reference back. It returns a hash code back, right? So that should be of the class type. So here the student constructor returns student type. So that's why when we create an object, we'll actually catch the reference which is of the type student only. So that's the point actually over here. Okay. And of course, this point is very important. When the class has no constructor, the default constructor automatically supplied to the compiler. So here in the test class, I don't have a constructor. In the first class, I don't have a constructor, but default constructor is supplied. So let me actually show you this. So Java C first.java. Of course, it has nothing actually, but default constructor will be supplied to this. I want to show you that. So Java first, and then if you see here, class first, which has a main method, but it also has the constructor, the default constructor. Okay, so this point is important. So when the class has no constructor, the default constructor automatically supplied by the compiler. Compiler supplies it upon compilation. Okay, so default constructor is a constructor which has no arguments. So there are two kinds of constructors. So here there are no args, and parameterized constructor is something which has parameters or args actually. Okay, and in a class you can use more than one constructor. In a class you can have more than one constructor. Then we call that as constructor overloading. You have to understand this one also, constructor overloading, right? So if you write a constructor in the class, then default constructor will not be supplied. When there is no constructor, then only default constructor is supplied. If you write, then it's not supplied. So this is the theory about the constructor. This much only. What is a constructor? What's its primary responsibility? Its primary responsibility is to construct the values for the object whenever it is invoked, right? And it has same name as the class name. It's a special method. It has no return type, but returns the class type. And there is no constructor written in the class. Default constructor is applied by the compiler. And there are two kinds of constructors, parameterized and default. Parameterized will take arguments, default has no arguments. And if you use more than one constructor in a class, then we call this as a constructor overloading. And overloading is a feature of polymorphism. And polymorphism is one of the major principles of object-oriented programming. Okay, we will discuss that little detail whenever we actually go to polymorphism. So now let me actually come to my class student.java. So here I have my private data members, all my private data members. So I ensure my class is fully encapsulated. Okay, then I have a setter and I have a getter. So in order to set the data, I have a setter for all these members. And in order to get the data, I have a getter for all these members. Of course, here a static variable is there, and this need not to be set, and static variables we will initialize. Fine. Now what we can actually do is, in order to create an object of student, okay, in order to create an object of student, we require, however, the constructor, and the constructor being supplied by the compiler, right? So now, since we are using the constructor during the object creation, right? So new student. However, we are using the constructor. What we can do is we can eliminate the need of a setter. We can eliminate the need of a setter actually. Okay, we can take out the setter and we can actually use constructor over there. So how to write the constructor? When I have a class student, my constructor will be like this: public student, and here let me copy all this stuff. So public student, and yeah, these are the local variables will part of the constructor, and I am actually assigning these local variables to my instance members. Now this is actually a constructor. This is a constructor, and what kind of constructor it is? Parameterized constructor. It's a parameterized constructor because there are parameters. Now if you see, my constructor is doing the same thing as my setter. Here I am setting the data to my instance members, and here I am setting uh, the data to instance members using the constructor. So by writing a constructor, we can eliminate the need of having a setter. So you can actually remove the setter for all. Okay, so you can eliminate the need of setter for all by using a parameterized constructor. So however you require a constructor to create an object, let's write the constructor over here and eliminate the need of a setter actually. Okay, so if you write the constructor must be same, having the same name as class. So we have ensured it. It has no return type, and it can be, usually it can be public. Otherwise, if you remove also, there is no problem. And here all these are local variables. Local variables are the variables which are declared inside a method or a constructor. And these local variables I am assigning to my instance members. So thus by constructing the values of these instance variables. And my access method is same. My getter method is same. So SID, SNAME, GPA, university. So that's it. Okay, now setter is eliminated and I have a constructor. Now I want to create an object of this. Okay, so I want to write my main method here itself. Of course, I can write my main method in test class, but now I want to write here itself. Okay, so public static void main string args. Now let's see. I want to create the object. So how to create the object? So you want to use a new operator and followed by the constructor. So which constructor? So do you have the default constructor? No. Since you have a constructor written, compiler is not going to supply you the default constructor. Okay. So what constructor you had? You had the parameterized constructor. So you have to pass the values. So this is the parameterized constructor. And you need to pass these values. So ID is how much? So let's say ID is 101. So some name actually. Name is some XYZ and the GPA is there, right? The GPA value. So GPA value is actually, so that means this average value I am passing, that will be GPA. That average value I am giving as 9.1. Okay, so the constructor, we know constructs or initializes the object with the default values first, and later as part of executing the bytecode, these local variables will be assigned to that particular object, correspondingly SID, SNAME and GPA. Now at the end of the construction, constructor returns a value back, that is the hash code that we have to catch with a reference variable, and the reference variable should be of same type as student, because for a student object is created if a reference will be should be of a student type only. So now I will say a student S1 equal to new student of, and I passed all the values. So now I can actually say S1 dot set. I can actually call these methods, right? So I don't have a setter method. Simply I can say S1 dot get student. So I don't require any setter over here. We have eliminated the need for the setter. Okay, so let me save this, compile and see how it works. Java C student.java. Compiled successfully. And when I run, actually, I have the student, I have the main method in my student class, and it starts with a main method. And in the main method, we are constructing the student object, and then we are asking for the get student. Now let's see. Yeah, so a student object got constructed, and here you can actually see the values are getting printed. So what all values are getting printed? So in the get student method, I am actually asking for SID, SNAME, GPA, and university, and all the four have got displayed. Fine. So this is actually about a constructor. This is a parameterized constructor. Okay, so I want to show you one more thing here. So I told you, right? So whenever you write a constructor, default constructor is not supplied. Let's see that. So here, if you see public class student, and you have the parameterized constructor which we have written, and get student method and the main method. So do you find the default constructor? No. So once you have a constructor and default constructor is not supplied by the compiler, so you want to test, you can test like this also. So now try to create another object s2, and that is equal to new student. So this time I am actually invoking the default constructor. This is the default constructor. So do you have the default constructor? No. So this should be an error, right? This should be an error. So let me actually say get student also. So student s2 equal to new students, the line number 24. This actually results into an error by compiler itself, because you don't have a default constructor. And how do you invoke that? So let's see actually that one. So I am actually trying to compile this, and here the line number 24. Okay, so Java 24. Now it says no argument constructor was found. If at all you want to use, you have to use a constructor with 3 variables. That is a parameterized constructor, right? So the actual and formal argument list differ in the length. So we're asking for a default constructor. I didn't find that. And there is actually a constructor which has 3 arguments. That's what actually it is saying, right? So now this is not valid. Now what actually you can do is, you can actually have your constructor. Okay, you can actually have your own constructors, as many as possible. Okay, not just one. Many constructors can be written actually as part of a class. So now let me write the default constructor now. I have a parameterized constructor and I can write a default constructor as well. So how to write the default constructor? So public student. So this is the default constructor usually supplied by the compiler. So now I'm just saying default constructor and public student. I have nothing actually here, no code. Okay, usually the compile supplied default constructor also will be like this only. There will be no code in this. Okay, but what actually, even though it has no code, what is the primary responsibility of a constructor? What is the primary responsibility? So that's important actually. The primary responsibility of a constructor is to construct instance members. Construct instance members with their defaults. The default values actually. Right? So that is the primary responsibility. Okay. So now this line will not be an error to me. The line number 28 is not going to be an error because I have a default constructor, but there is no code. But what the constructor will do? Constructor will just create some objects and it will initialize the instance members with their default values. If you have any bytecodes like this, any assignment, it will assign, but here there is no assignment. So that means my student object, which is referred by s2, will have all default values. So that's why when I say s2.getStudent, I am going to get all the values like this. So your SID is actually integer, so that will be 0, and sname is going to be null because string type default value, and your GPA value is going to be 0.0. This is the output that you are going to expect because there is no code over here. Fine. Yeah, so constructor, it does its primary responsibility, and it will construct the instance members with their defaults. Let's actually verify that. Okay, so here now this will not be a compile time error for sure because we have the default constructor as well. And when I run, now you can actually see my S1, which is having data. My S1 has data, right? So here you can actually see my S1 has data, but my S2 has no data. And what is this printing? 0, null, and 0.0. And of course, my get student has university. That's a static variable, right? So that university is coming actually. So that will get printed because that's actually not part of the object. That is actually in the class area, right? That is a static variable. Fine. Yeah. So you can actually have more than one constructor. When you have more than one constructor, we can actually say this has constructor overloading. Okay, so the constructor has the same name, right? Here student and here student, and it's getting overloaded. right? The same construct, same name, but multiple things actually. So here it has nothing to do, but here it is actually taking certain local variables and assigning. So when you have more than one constructor, then it is actually constructor overloading. When you have a method with the same name, but your parameters are different, types are different, or order is different, then that is called method overloading. Okay, so overloading is a polymorphic feature. I will explain that in detail later on. And yeah, in this default constructor, right? If you want any code to be written, you can actually write. Okay, so here I am saying it's a default constructor. I say it's a default constructor. Okay, so that will get printed actually. Okay, whenever the constructor is invoked, right? New student, whenever constructor is invoked, it goes to new student, and first its default that will get printed, and then get student get student. So the default values are going to get printed. Let's see. Yeah, now you can see this is S1, and whenever new student, so there is actually some code is there, so that is its default constructor that is getting printed, and actually here you have the default values. Okay, so this is about actually the constructor overloading and parameterized constructor and default constructors. So I just give you the last points about constructor overloading, and so that we can conclude the session. Yeah, so what is overloading? So I told this about polymorphism. The polymorphism is the ability to take more than one form. So here, when you have more than one constructor, so that means the constructor is actually doing different things, right? Default constructor is doing one thing, parameterized constructor is doing something, right? I can have one more constructor with other variables, uh, other local variables, and which are constructing some other instance numbers like that I can have, right? So when this overloading is possible, actually this overloading is possible with only methods. Okay, you have only method overloading. Okay, we don't have any data overloading or class overloading something. Overloading happens only with the methods. And what are the conditions for overloading? If overloading has to happen, uh, of course, overloading happens for methods, and of course, my constructors are also methods, right? Special methods. What are the conditions? There are three conditions actually for overloading to happen. In overloading, you will have the same named things. The constructor student, I have also constructor student. Method also, same named methods will be there. So same named methods or constructors are allowed as long as the parameters are different. As long as the parameters are different. So in method, you have two parameters. In other method, you have three parameters, but the method name is same. Then method overloading is possible. In one constructor, you have no arguments. Other constructor, you have arguments. That is constructor overloading. That's possible. And types are different. So this time, what should happen? This time, how you can how what overloading will happen is, let's say my method is there. Let's say some method add method is there. I have two double values, and in I have another add method where actually I have two strings. Right? So there are doubles and here strings actually, but number of arguments are same, and method name is also same, but the types are different. Then also method overloading is possible. And of course, when order of the params or arguments are different. So these are the three possible things when actually the method overloading or constructor overloading will happen. So order means, for example, I have the same named method add, and I have same number of arguments also. Let's say in first method I have int a and double b, and in other method I have the same two parameters only, add method, but double a and int b. Two parameters there, here also two parameters, but the order of the parameters is different, right? So then also the method overloading is possible. So method overloading or the constructor overloading is possible as long as the number of parameters are different, the types of the parameters are different, and order of the params are different. Okay, so here just we have seen about the constructor overloading, and in Other examples, actually, we will see the method overloading also. Since we are discussing overloading, just I want to have a few things told about this one actually. So this is about constructors, and hope you have understood about the constructors. It's a simple stuff, but most important stuff actually to be uh, understandable by everybody if they are using Java, because in order to create an object, you require a constructor. So that's all about constructors, and thank you.